Hi everyone, I'm George Harrison, a trainee solicitor here at the Jonathan Lee Network, and today I'm going to be discussing declaration of trust and why, if you are a property owner or if you're even considering buying a property, you should consider having one in place. So what is a declaration of trust? It is a formal binding written agreement between two or more property owners that demonstrates how they own each individual share in the property, what obligations are on each party in terms of paying utility bills, etc., like for example electricity or water bills, or even the mortgage as well, mortgage payments every month, and also in relation to how the property will be sold in the future and what arrangements are going to be made to deal with such sale of a property, how each party will get their respective shares they're entitled to as per the declaration of trust. And it also reflects how property is owned. So usually when someone enters into a declaration of trust between two or more people, they will own the property as what we call tenants in common. So when we look at different types of property ownership, there is joint tenants and tenants in common. Tenants in common own the property in divisible shares, basically. So person A may own 40% of the property, and person B may own 60% of the property. Or they may own equal shares in the property on a 50-50 basis. And when people own a property as tenants in common, their share of the property can pass via their will. And alternatively, you have joint tenants who own the property jointly and severally. So, for example, if one joint tenant dies, the other joint tenant will be entitled to the whole of the property upon their passing, and the property won't pass via the will. So that's why when people own a property as tenants in common, it's very important to have a declaration of trust in place to really demonstrate their share of the property and how their relationship will go forward in the future in relation to ongoing obligations in relation to the property as well, up to a potential sale. So what should you include in the declaration of trust? When you're drawing up the document, there'll be various things to consider, and you'll have to include all the relevant information in relation to the property and both of the parties entering into the declaration of trust. So you'll obviously be setting up your joint intentions in relation to the property, specifying your individual shares in the property. There'll also be various provisions about who pays for utility bills, such as electricity and water, insurance, is also another common thing that should be included. Council tax bills, any mortgage payments that will be made, and there'll be various other items included, such as ownership of furniture, cost of decorating or remodelling the property if necessary. If the property is going to be sold in the future, that's often something that's commonly put into the declaration of trust, you're going to have to work out how the property will be valued and what sort of calculations and methods of valuation will be used. So these are various items, and there are many more you can include as well, but these are most common things that are usually included in the declaration of trust. So how long is a declaration of trust valid for? A declaration of trust is valid for as long as it is active, and usually the parties will include a variation and revocation clause within the declaration of trust. It will usually say something along the lines of, this deed may be either varied or revoked at any time with the written consent of both beneficiaries. And that will be a suitable provision in the declaration of trust to make sure that in the future both beneficiaries can agree to any amendments to it or the complete revocation of the declaration of trust. Also, in relation to where is the declaration of trust kept after it's been executed, that's quite a common question. So usually the declaration of trust is kept privately between the parties, but it is important to remember that at the land registry a restriction should be put on the title to explain there's a behind-the-scenes beneficial interest in the property. And that's very important to do because the declaration of trust itself, by statute, cannot in normal circumstances be uploaded to the land registry, as it were, to be put aside the title, because the land registry is interested in the parties maintaining the privacy of the Declaration of Trust. It's a private document and it's kept between the parties and it's not to be made public. So that's why the restriction evidences the intention of the parties to enter into the Declaration of Trust and demonstrates that anyone looking at the register of title, be it a future purchaser, for example, that there's a behind the scenes beneficial interest in the property. How is the Declaration of Trust executed? The Declaration of Trust will need to be executed as a deed, which means that it needs to be signed by each party. There's going to be a party to the Declaration of Trust itself, and it needs to be dated and then signed by a witness who's an independent person who's over the age of 18, who's not a spouse, family member or other relative. Could, for example, be a neighbour who is witnessing the Declaration of Trust. And the Declaration of Trust will set out each party's intentions and obviously shows that they'll intend to be bound by the deed. We recommend our clients to certify copies of the Declaration of Trust for everyone's records. This means that each copy will be confirmed by a qualified person, usually a solicitor, as a true copy of the original document. So how is each party's share calculated in the Declaration of Trust? So the main aim of the Declaration of Trust is to avoid any confusion or any issues potentially arising in the future if the property needs to be sold, or even if another party needs to buy the other party's share of the property. So to achieve that purpose, the Declaration of Trust will usually specify the precise percentage share each party owns in the property. Now, if Party A contributed 65% of the deposit, along with the other purchase costs, and for instance the monthly mortgage payments, and Party B only contributed 35% of the deposit, it would therefore normally make sense for those to be the percentages of ownership that each party holds. So Party A would hold 65% of the property and Party B would hold 35% of the property. Alternatively, you can put a mechanism in place in the Declaration of Trust when things are a little bit more complicated or you can't determine what the precise percentage shares are at the moment, and that would be a formula in the Declaration of Trust setting out how the property will be proportioned between the parties in the future. So basically setting out the proportion that each party owns, and that can be valued at a different point. So what happens to a Declaration of Trust if you get married? If you get married to a partner who you own your property with, your respective rights in the property will be determined by Section 25 of the Matrimonial Causes Act 1973. And this potentially could take priority over any Declaration of Trust you previously entered into. Therefore, we'd usually recommend to include a provision in the Declaration of Trust for what will happen if you marry, even if you have no immediate plans to get married at present. Alternatively, you may consider putting the terms of the Declaration of Trust, basically transferring them into a suitable prenuptial agreement, which will help to mitigate the risk of any future potential confusion that may arise. So what steps should you take when you're setting up a Declaration of Trust? Well, firstly, it's important to remember that each beneficial owner's shares of the property will be set out in the Declaration of Trust. Now, it's important to also remember at this point that the legal owners of the property and the beneficial owners of the property are distinct. So the legal owners will be recorded in the register of title of the property at the land registry. So let's say that person A and person B jointly own the property. Well, they may have it so that person A is the legal owner of the property and is registered as such at the land registry, and they hold the property on trust for both them and person B. Or person A and person B could both be recorded as the co-owners of the property at the land registry, and they'll both hold it on trust for themselves, as they're both also beneficial owners. So that's one of the key steps that's important to remember, is that the beneficial ownership will need to be recorded in the Declaration of Trust. Another point is that the Declaration of Trust is actually not registered at the land registry, and to register the Declaration of Trust you would register a Form A restriction usually, and this would basically show to any potential purchaser or anyone looking at the register of title that there are behind the scenes beneficial interests in the property, and that there may be a declaration of trust. There are declarations of trust themselves will be a formal written document, and they'll be kept privately between the parties. Usually each party should retain a copy of the declaration of trust once it has been executed, to show their beneficial interest in the property and what's been agreed therein. We strongly recommend that competent legal advice is sought in relation to the declaration of trust, and we're more than happy to help. In the first instance, please contact wewillhelp@jonathanlee.net, and we can see what we can do in relation to providing you with a 20-minute, no cost, no obligation call to discuss your matter and work out how best we can help.